as a film critic, I've been following Taylor since 2015 now. But actually, he's been a prolific actor for a long time before that. If you turn on your television between the mid-90s and 2011, you saw him. He was on things like Walker, Texas Ranger, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, CISs, NCIs, all kinds of stuff, and Star Trek Enterprise, which means you get to be in every Comic-Con for free for like the rest of your life, pretty much. It's a good thing, because they're expensive. Anyway, around 2011, though, I guess the acting bug sort of changed to something else, and we can talk about that. And he directed a film called Vile, pretty nasty film. And then there was a lull for a period of time, which maybe we can talk about too. And then he came back with a little film you might have heard about called Sicario. Wrote that one, great. And I don't know about you, as a film critic, I try to stay away from trailers and things. I want to go in as clean as possible. And I knew the bare bones about it going in. I knew a great cast, obviously Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin. By the way, Collector and Thanos, you're going to need to learn that for Comic-Cons. Okay? And I was like, oh, Emily Blunt, I'm there, let's go. So, blown away, forgive the pun, all the critics were, just loved it. And for lots of reasons. Obviously the cast, there was talent oozing from every frame, but the cinematography and the story. Writing is very important, not only as a critic, but as a viewer, and as a budding, playwright myself. And I'm sure for all of you creative people, you kind of watch these films both for enjoyment, and you're also watching going, oh, this is so good, how can I do this? How can I do this myself? So we really enjoyed it, and I thought, I'm gonna who is this? I'm gonna look this person up, and Taylor Sheridan. Oh, it's a guy. His parents named him after 2 girls. And I was like, this must be tough. Growing up looking like a supermodel, must be a tough upbringing. I got it. Anyway, so I'm like, I'm going to follow this guy. I'm going to watch this guy. But I didn't have long to wait because, as you saw, Hell or High Water the following year. Actually, and maybe the writing overlapped with when it actually came out, but I guess Sicario attracted enough attention that they said, let's hear from this guy again. Hell or High Water, another great cast. Chris Pine, Ben Foster, Jeff Bridges, among others. And folks like me nominated it to be Best Original Screenplay. Isn't that awesome? Second screenplay, it's nominated. And that must have got more attention, and somebody said, let's get this man a shield. That's another Comic-Con reference. I am giving you gold here, by the way. Let's get this man a director's chair. He comes back the following year with Wind River. Another great cast, Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch. Just helping out. And I got to see it at Sundance before it came down the mountain. And I couldn't stop talking about it. I would come into work and say, good morning. They'd be like, yeah, I know, Wind River, it's great. And then it came out, and everyone else got to see it and loved it. And that must have gotten everyone's attention again, because now, creator, writer, producer, director of Yellowstone for the Paramount Network, which, by the way, I think is coming out June 20th. You get to see it. And it's shot right here in Utah, up the Utah Film Studios. And thank you very much for that, because it really puts us on the map and shows everyone our great resources here. I don't know if all of you have, some of you probably worked on it. I got up there to see the sets, nothing second rate. I mean, just amazing set. I was gonna move in to that one cabin. It's an amazing place. Again, Kevin Costner, lots of great talent. And of course, somewhere in there, he writes a sequel to Sicario. I don't know how you fit this stuff in. I'm assuming, though, you're just so busy that you can't direct that one with everything else that you're doing. And you had your auspicious return to acting with, I think, Angry Cowboy #1 in maybe, what, a third FBI agent from the left. And, like, you put yourself into a couple of your films, too. So he's still acting, but just, do you play guitar or anything? Do you play drums? You got a band on the side?
No, I don't do anything else.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. You're just a good actor. He lied to me, and I no. So, crazy talented guy. I'm just going to turn it over to him now. Everyone, Taylor Sheridan. I'm sure we all have questions. I think, I don't know if we're going to pass this one around, or if you get to talk, let's just start off with one for me for some of the things I mentioned. What did happen in that break in between, say, 2011 and 2015 when you weren't acting and you directed Vile, but were you just writing Sicario? What was going on there?
Well, so Vile is an interesting story because I had no intention of directing and I had no intention of writing. I had left Sons of Anarchy after 2 seasons, and this kid that I knew who's from Aberdeen, Idaho, this farm kid, his mother had passed and he had gotten about 100 grand in life insurance. And being a really dumb kid, wrote this terrible script and spent all that money to try and make it, and hired some scumbag director in LA that took the money and disappeared, and so now he has almost no money, and he was going to try and direct it, and he was 2 days away from starting to film, and he was over at my house asking me, like, how do you do it? Like, and I hadn't done it before, but I'd been on set with him, countless directors, and I was like, kid, you're never gonna, you really painted yourself in a corner. And I said, look, I'll help you, let me help you do this, because there is a way to sell this. Just give it away and get some of that money back. There is a market for these straight to DVD things. It's a horror genre. You can get a chunk of it back. So I called friends that I knew, camera people and gaffers and whatnot, and he had nothing, and we slapped together a crew, and I made as many changes to the script as I could, and I think we shot that in a week, and then I stepped away. I didn't edit it. It's generous to call me the director of it. But in doing so, I discovered, there were some things. You were going back and looking at that thing. There's a couple of elegant moments of I was like, this is what I want to do. But I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it the traditional way. And the traditional way is you go shoot a short and put it in festivals and attempt to garner some attention and hope that some agent notices, and then it's a lot of hoping. And I've been in this business a long time, and I knew that that's rolling dice. What isn't rolling dice is creating something tangible. And a screenplay is a tangible thing. And you can have a master's degree from Harvard in literature, or you can be like myself, a college dropout, and none of that matters if the content is good. So I decided to sit down and write a story that then I would take out and sell. And I knew that if I did that enough, then the business would trust me to direct my own material. So I wrote Sicario in 2011. I wrote Hell or High Water, which used to be called Comancheria, immediately thereafter. And we sold that first. It sold years before Sicario. Then we had a tremendous challenge trying to cast it. And finding a director. There were a number of different directors. Peter Berg was attached to direct it at one point. And then a guy named Mark Forster, who did World War Z, and that great movie with Billy Bob Thornton and Halle Berry, which the name escapes me, Monsters Ball. And then he fell out, and then we found David Mackenzie. So while all that's going on, I'd written Wind River, and that was the one I knew I was going to direct, but I couldn't take it out. I had to hide it, keep it away until these movies came out. So finally, Sicario, a producer read Sicario and fell in love with it, sent it to Denis. Denis loved it. We sent it to Benicio, and it came together, I would say, in 3 months. While we'd been spending 2.5 years trying to put Hell or High Water together. And it was in production before. So even though it was sold years before, or years after it came out first. So then as soon as it came out, then there was a real appetite for Hell or High Water. It gets filming, and then the business trusted me to make Wind River. So looking back, it was a ridiculous plan that worked because I wrote about things that I cared about. I wrote movies I wanted to go see, and that's visceral, and people can feel that when they read them. And so that's how we end up here.
And that's kind of what I was hinting at when I said, oh, maybe this overlapped. It's interesting to hear how long something takes to get done, even though it's in the can as far as you're concerned, it's written. And when you say Wind River, that was the one you knew you were going to direct, you mean in your own head that's the one you wanted, or did you have some kind of an agreement already out there?
No, I had no agreement. I just knew that that was the one I wanted to direct.
And so if, what were you doing during that time when all that planning was going on and it was just dragging on? I mean, what?
Oh,
I guess
wrote
what I'm asking is like, how do you live during that time?
Well, you do rewrites on other things. I wrote a screenplay for Warner Brothers. For every movie that gets made, most screenwriters, successful screenwriters, write 3 or 4 that will never get made, and it's not because they're not good. It could be the challenge of how expensive they are, the right actor attached, the director attached, and then he goes off. So it's unusual actually to have, everything that you write, or most everything you write, be actually produced. For any producers out there, they can tell you just how difficult it is to raise that money and make a movie. In the studio system, it's not a question of money. It's a question of they deal in such massive. You take Warner Brothers for example. Maybe they make 10, 14, 20 movies a year that costs between 130 and 250 million dollars. So it's just they have a slate, and there's only so many that can fit in it. In the independent world, it's limitless. The challenge then is finding money and having, and you need a piece of cast that will give you some foreign value, so you can. That's how you raise the money to make a movie. That's how we did it with Wind River. Jeremy Renner's worth a certain amount. We go sell the foreign rights. We take that amount. That's our money. That's our movie.
Well, does anyone have questions, by the way? I'm assuming you do. If so, we'll pass this around, or you can stand up. And it's probably a small enough room that you can say it, and we can hear it. Are you saying that you have other scripts in the can that are not being made?
I don't have other scripts in the can. I have a script at Warner Brothers that I'll direct either late this fall or the first of next year. And then I have other projects that are lined up after that. So there's more to come.
Well, like it said in the reel that they showed, you do ask a lot of great questions. That was something that definitely came out in Sicario, and you watched the trailer for the sequel, and I can tell that you're asking a lot of questions about things that are happening right now politically in the world. And you also seem to have a recurring theme of exploitation, like people who are being exploited who shouldn't be maybe, and how they handle it, how they keep their dignity while this is all happening. Or, is that something that drives you? I mean, that's just from my point of view.
Yeah, 100%. I try to make elevated action films. I try to. It's a very the action genre, the thriller genre. They're exciting to watch, and it's good sugar on the pill. No one wants to go see a movie that preaches at them. I don't want to go see a movie that preaches at me, even if it's exciting. But I do want a movie to make me think and ask questions. But I also don't want to be bored. So for me, I like to take a theme that I think is important and place it in a genre that cinematically is riveting.
There was a theme for this meeting, which is a bit of a Hollywood then and now. Kind of Hollywood how it used to be done, and Hollywood how it's being done now. And I think you're a good person to talk to about that because, as you mentioned, you had a plan for how you're going to do it. Maybe it was a weird plan, maybe it was a little bit of luck, but it worked. And a lot of these people want to do the same. They're very creative folks, and they want to get their product out there. Does anyone have any questions about getting your product in front of people, or how it works now, what you can do now differently?
I can take the mic. There you go. Get you up.
Okay, I have a mic.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. When you were talking about attaching Jeremy Renner to Wind River to go out and sell your foreign territories because he's worth something, so that's how you get your first piece of money. Did you attach Jeremy without that first piece of equity, or you were just able to put a deal on the table in order to attach him? and then go out and sell on that?
Well, yeah, generally the way it works is this. So you'll find a producer, and that producer, and producers do a number of things. But what they do best, their most vital purpose is resources and relationships. So relationships with finance companies, relationships with actors and directors, that's their job. They're salesmen until they need to lend a creative voice. So they'll have relationships with finance companies. Finance company reads the script. They're interested in the script. They figure out, what that you try to find the sweet spot of, what's the least amount we can make it for that still allows us to make it properly. So we have something tangible that's worth having. And once you figure that out, then you're going to try and find a piece of cast that allows you to go get those foreign territories that the finance company will do. What the finance company, it's funny, I don't know why they're called finance companies because they don't really put up any money. And then they'll secure loans to bridge the gap between what the foreign raises and what the movie may actually cost. And then this is either extremely interesting or really boring, depending on what you do in the industry. And then you're going to go get a bond company, and then you're going to go get a bridge loan, and then you're going to have your money, and then you're going to go make a movie, and all of those people are going to make a lot of money, and you aren't.
So how do you make money then?
I mean, in independent film,
Yeah.
you don't.
Can I
You
answer?
don't. You'll make enough to. You're not going to get rich.
Yeah.
You don't get rich making Wind Rivers. That's not. You get rich making television shows, and after you make a few Wind Rivers and Hell or High Waters, then you're like, okay, I got to pay off this house. I'm gonna go make a TV show.
Gotcha.
I have the mic. We want to raise your hand.
Okay.
Over there. I'll just throw.
I can just ask.
You probably can. Yeah.
Taylor, can you tell us about your writing process? What that looks like on a daily basis?
It's different now than it was when I first started. I didn't have any training as a writer, so it was difficult. I saw images, but the structure was a challenge. I think the first thing to do, and it depends. I've sat down to write stories that I've very roughly outlined, and I think the best stories are when you don't plot it out. And you let yourself go on the journey, and you're as surprised to see what happens next as the person who's going to read it. And so that's how I like to write. I like to know tonally what the movie's, how it's supposed to feel. Wind River is a very heavy film with there's not a lot of levity, and that's by design. In Hell or High Water, I wanted it to be really fun until it wasn't. So you have to understand the tone, and you have to understand what you're trying to say, and not necessarily what you're trying to say to move a plot forward, but what's this thing about? And every line and every action should somehow move that point forward, even more so than the plot. There's a lot of scenes in Hell or High Water, for example, that have absolutely nothing to do with plot. The scene in the diner with the waitress has nothing to do with plot. Conversations between the two brothers that do not move plot forward, but let you understand their motivations. So, I've said many times, I like to come up with a really simple plot because it allows me the real estate on the page to develop really complex characters.
On that, could you mention what we were talking about at the table, the music while you're writing?
Yeah, he asked me, someone asked me if I, how did I choose music? Did I choose music? And I do. I spend as much time, putting together a playlist for a piece I'm going to write as I probably do writing the piece. And because I'm looking for a certain tone to a scene and even a certain rhythm to the scene. And so I'll write to, in fact, I wrote the scene where in Sicario where they're driving across the border. I wrote that to a scene by a band called Perfect Circle. Judith is the name of the song. And it is an angry, brooding, pulsing song. And I wanted that, almost that bass line in the scene. And so, you know, for certain scenes, I'll listen to a song over and over and over. When I was writing Wind River, there's a song called Hallelujah by Ryan Bingham, and at the end of writing it, I had listened to it 152 times. So music's it's very important to me when I'm writing.
I'm assuming your wife is not in the room.
Well, I had fun.
Oh, I have one over here.
Hey Taylor, your perspective and your portrayal is extremely different, okay, in a very good way. And I think you nailed it when you said, and the last time I heard someone say this, honestly, I was sitting next to Ridley Scott. He said, I'm making movies I want to see. And I also heard that with an interview with Spielberg and Larry King or something like that. But what is it? Yeah, I'm sure the core of it is your writing, okay? When I watched Wind River, I had no reason not to believe that that person was that character, that person was the police officer, that was the agent. I just went right into them. Is it your dialogue? Can you give us any hints on how you go through the process of creating your good dialogue and how you create that aura that we're in that event, we're not watching a movie? How does that happen with you? I mean, extremely good work, Taylor.
Thank you very much. So as a director, you're only as good as the screenplay that you have. So the first thing you have to do is have the best screenplay you possibly can. A screenwriter is an architect, and a director is a general contractor. So he can only build as good a house as the plans that are laid out. So that's first and foremost. And then the most important decision you will make as a director is casting. And depending on the position that you're in, if you're dealing with a studio, then you're going to have a lot of fights over what they think is palatable and what you think is right. I'm dealing with it right now. So they may want the biggest movie star that they can put in there because they feel that that's going to put butts in seats, and yet that person may not be right for the role. And we've seen countless films that because of that model, the film was never able to be elevated to the point where it could have been or should have been. So casting is the most important thing that you'll do. And you have to, I believe, that you have to find people who have the essence and are in the emotional place that the character is in. Jeremy had just had a kid. She was 3 years old, and he's 44 years old, 45. And having a kid later in life, which I did as well, it somehow magnifies your mortality and your concern for the child and responsibility in a way that, if you have a kid when you're 22, you're so freaked out you just had a kid, you're not aware of all those things. You're trying to work a job and trying to do this, but when you're in your midlife and you have you bring in a new life, it really magnifies the experience. And he was in that place and had a daughter, and so he was so emotionally connected to that character that it was the perfect choice creatively. And then if you'll look at Lizzie for her role, Lizzie's someone who grew up around some very, very, very famous older sisters, and that does, and very successful and continue to be, and that does one or two things to someone. If you're a younger sibling of people that have had extreme success, or the children of someone who've had extreme success, you either feel like you can't ever live up to it, or you just have this core confidence. And that's what Lizzie has. She embodies it. And so she could play a character that was innocent without seeming weak. And she came across as inexperienced, but not incapable. And so those were the elements I was looking at for that character. So for me, it doesn't matter what someone looks like necessarily. They generally need to look like what I wrote, but it's much more about, you know, their essence as a person. And it's Steven Spielberg who said, "Do not cast the actor, cast the man." And meaning, I'll hire the cowboy and teach him how to act over hiring the actor that I got to teach to be a cowboy any day of the week. And so, you know, I try to find, because I don't have time to teach someone how to act, I try to find someone that has both.
On that, do you ever have someone in your mind when you're writing characters? Do you think, oh, this is the Jeremy Renner kind of person, or is it just, does it come out after you write?
You're aware, you know, I think Ben Foster was probably the one that I thought of most when I wrote Hell or High Water. Jeremy was someone who was a first choice from day one once it was real, but I didn't have anyone in mind when I wrote that character. Yeah, and then I have had people in mind for roles and written them specifically for that person, and then that person not want to do it. That's happened to me twice. Yeah.
All right, so this will be a different type of question. It'll come from the Utah Film Studios staff. So we see you at studio off and on, of course, a lot in the last year. And we'll see you in editorial or going in and out of editorial. We'll see you directing, of course. When we don't see you, we imagine you're writing. You've also told us you work with the horses. And that we seem to imagine that you work out too. So our question was, how do you compartmentalize your time to do all those things? What's your formula that allows you to be in all those places yet and be present in that moment?
There's no formula. There's where you're required to be the most at a specific time, and so, you know, need kind of dictates the schedule, and all these things have to happen. And I'm not a very good delegator, so I have people that keep a rigid schedule for me that I ignore.
It doesn't look like you ignore it. You seem to be where you need to be when you need to be there. So we're duly impressed by watching how you work and work with your crew and make things happen and produce great things. So that's what we see.
Thank you.
Oh, back there. Yep.
While he was getting over there, you had mentioned that it sometimes takes you hours to write one scene. Would you mind just mentioning to us how long it took you to write, say, Sicario and Hell and High Water, or Wind River, like how long it actually took you to finish the script?
It took me longest to write Sicario, which was my first. So it took me about 4.5 months. Hell or High Water I wrote in 3 weeks. Wind River took about 6 weeks.
And is it do you work on it every day, or just when you feel like some people, again, set a schedule, I'm gonna work on my script 8 hours a day or whatever, do you write when it hits you, or how does that work for you?
When I first started, there would be, you know, days that you're staring at, you can't think of anything. And then I would have days that I would start writing at 8 in the morning and be, next thing I know, it's 3 in the morning. I had a lot of those. As I've gotten more experience as a storyteller now, I can sit down and go, okay, I'm writing from 11 to 4. And my routine is, you know, so familiar to me now in that regard that once I sit down, once I put the music on, the mind just goes to that place. Yeah.
Hi, so you mentioned that something that's important for you with your screenplays is to develop the character and focus on not necessarily the plot, but scenes and what those can convey. And I was wondering, with your screenplays, how much of that, when you finish writing, is set in stone, or how much of it is like an addition, like a continuing creative process once you're actually on set, and you know, the dialogue that you write in your screenplay, is that set in stone, or how much of it you know, continues to change while you're on set with those? How
Very little changes. Set is not the place to change things. The place to change things is in editorial. So, you know, actors will sometimes improvise lines or add lines, or paraphrase lines, and sometimes it makes them better, sometimes it doesn't. And you have to be egoless. And if someone, you know, alters a line because of the way that they speak, and there are some directors that aren't egoless. They want every word said exactly this way. But sometimes it makes it better. It is a collaborative creative process. And as a director, my job really is to capture it and not try to control it. So usually by the time that you have, you know, you're ready to film, you've poured over the script so completely that you've cut any fat from it at that point anyway. So generally speaking, if anything was to be removed or altered, it would probably at that point have a butterfly effect throughout the script. So you have to be really careful, but you also want to leave room for, you know, for creation.
Back here.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about your process? Can you talk a little bit about your process in terms of either being a director or screenwriter, and how you convey your visual vision to your creative team?
So, you know, now that I only write for me to direct, I'm not writing for another director. It streamlines the process a bit because I'm shot listing as I write the screenplay. And I usually figure out a visual style as a director as I'm writing the screenplay. And I'll have rules that when I break them, it's for a reason. For example, now, Wind River, I didn't have the time to, and shooting in snow really limits you. You can't really put a dolly track down in snow. So I had to shoot the whole thing handheld because there was no other way to shoot it. For the series Yellowstone, I really wanted it to feel like a John Ford Western. I wanted it to be a sweeping, real cinematic, something that you don't see on television. And so the way to do that is to eliminate a lot of the gimmicks and the tricks that are available to a director now visually, such as Steadicam or shooting handheld. So, and then to just get real geeky, you know, the lens that you choose and the types of lenses and the rules you make for those. You know, I like to shoot really long lenses and be a little farther away, and it adds a depth to, you know, to what you're looking at, and what I feel is a more emotional image and a more realistic image. I think it's what can pull someone into a, you know, you don't feel like you're watching something you're separate from. So, you know, all of it really does add up. And, you know, I use the same crew on everything now, so it's a shorthand, they understand it. And once my DP and I come up with, you know, our visual game plan, what are the rules that we're gonna very rarely break, then it's easy to explain.
As a filmmaker, we're in a very influential medium. And it's very easy for us to kind of use our influence to either make things better or make things harder. What kind of things would you recommend filmmakers can do with this type of influence that would make the world better?
Don't judge. Don't judge your characters. Justify actions. And don't give answers. I've said in many panels before that if someone can guess my political leaning from one of my films, I failed. I'm not a politician, and I don't pretend to be. and I won't use my films. People say they're political, they're not, they're social. And they don't offer answers, they ask questions. I think that that's, you know, if you think about this medium is just a modernized version of theater. And theater goes all the way back to people standing around a campfire acting out how to do this or don't do this, or if the bear comes, go that way, you know. And this is just a more refined version of storytelling to bring a community together and, you know, enlighten us and, you know, learn about ourselves. And so, you know, that's at its best, that's what it can do. At its worst, it's exploitative and mean, and cynical, and can convey that. So, yeah, don't judge your characters and don't give me answers.
Hi Tyler, how you doing? I have a question for independent filmmakers. You know, there's a lot of nowadays groups, entourage, that, you know, they gather together with their skills to try to leverage from the independent industry, since it's very hard to get to the studios and try to push your projects. So in my case, in our case, it's worth to have, let's say, a post-production studio, you know, like partnership, and then you have, like me, myself, I'm a director, and then you have the script writer and everything. So let's say you have private investors, scenes, doing the financing and all that. Everybody gets rich except you. You already mentioned it. So we're trying to do all this parallel to how the actual, you know, mainstream industry works. When you start finding the money, right? And let's say you cannot reach a budget to match as studios, but let's say a $1 million, $2 million range, just to give you an example. What would be, in your case, if you would have that opportunity and you would not be in the position you are right now, your strategy, if you already have a great story, how would be your strategy in terms of like casting and try to, the genre of course, because he has to do a lot with the budget, to really make it happen and try to have an open door with the studio once your product is already done, but in an independent way. I don't know if...
Yeah, no, I understand. There's varying degrees of, we use, well, the terms are very simple. In Hollywood, we call it clean money, okay? And then there's lots of dirty money. Clean money is some very wealthy guy or girl who loves movies and is wealthy enough to finance them fully themselves. And when you find someone like that, then there are no bond company fees, there are no, you know, all these packaging, all that goes away. And so, you know, I'll use Wind River as an example of a film that had a net budget of about 10 million. And yet I had 2.4 million to actually physically shoot the movie and 600,000 for post. I had a $750,000 prep budget. So where's that other 5 million? It's in a lot of pockets that aren't mine, okay? But that's the price of doing business. That's the price of the model that I explained to you. Going out, selling the foreign, having a finance company either take a loan from Bank of America or East West or one of these other places. The bond company is going to charge their fees. The bank's going to charge their fees. The bridge loan is a 20% interest rate payable in 90 days. So if you take $1 million bridge loan, you're writing a check for 1.2, and that's just whittling down your production budget. So there are film investors in Hollywood and New York and all over, people who love movies and are so rich that they can afford to write a check for $2 to $4 to $10 million and cover that. That's the best situation you'll ever be in. And then, you know, the festival model is really the lifeblood of the independent film industry. Where Sundance is really the mother of independent films. It gave an opportunity and an outlet for buyers to come and see a lot of movies in a very short period of time. And all these other festivals that have spawned since have created more outlets. So if you have a really good script and you make a really good movie and you get accepted into one of these festivals, it's seen by everyone. You know, the perfect storm is a competitive situation where you have multiple distributors bidding on that. And I have been at Sundance and seen, people reach a multiple, in other words, doubling their budget expense in the auction bid. And so they're walking out, of the festival already in the black. So that's the perfect way. But it's risky for that investor because if you make 10 independent films between $2 and $10 million, you're 200 million in, maybe 100 million in, and you need one of those now to be really successful, or all of them to be moderately successful, or you're not going to be rich very long. So I know some guys who had, I know one individual who came in with around $4 billion, invested very, very heavily, and he's not in the game anymore because the movies didn't work. So you're most likely going to find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with finance companies that are going to go get loans, and that's just the reality. And you'll be paid for your services, but it's not a. If you want to make a lot of money in independent film world, write a horror film. You can shoot them for $1 million, and they will go make $100 million if they're good.
Thank you.
Guys, we have about 15 more minutes. So if you want to get your questions in, now's the time. Oh, you can just ask them over there. Yeah.
So we heard this about the transition from acting to directing. What really motivated you to change from acting to?
I didn't really like acting, to be honest with you.
You did a whole heck of a lot of something.
I wasn't that good. I was okay. But I didn't love it. I did love films. I did love being on set and was fascinated with movie making and storytelling, but I was never, I did it. And I can remember, I've seen myself and I'm like, whatever. And the things that you'd asked me this earlier, I found myself, since I quit acting, in a couple of roles, and that was a result of me writing a character and the director calling and going, well, thanks, you gave a 2-page monologue to a cowboy on a horse doing this and that, and they don't exist, so you get to come do it. And I helped out Jerry Bruckheimer on this movie, 12 Strong, and same thing happened, and he's like, hey dude, you came up with this thing, now you gotta come do it, because we can't find anyone to do it. So that's, I just didn't really like it that much.
Kind of a follow-up to that, how did you feel that just a follow-up to that, how did you feel like your acting informed you as a writer and as a storyteller just in general?
Well, what I learned when I started writing, that's when I was really like, oh God, I wasn't a very good actor. But I understood story. I knew what the writer was trying to say. I got that. I wasn't terribly good at conveying it, but I understood story well enough that it worked. So that's what I learned about it.
Hello, Taylor, right here. My question is about rehearsal. As an actor going into directing, how vital is it to you to rehearse with your actors?
It's extremely helpful. The way that I rehearse is before we start filming. I like extensive rehearsal before we start filming because I don't rehearse while we're filming. The traditional way to do it is you move on from one scene to the next, you get all the actors in the room, we rehearse the scene, we try and figure out where everyone wants to be. That takes about an hour. And then we put the cameras where we have to put them because of wherever these actors decided to go. I don't do it like that. I follow a model that Ridley Scott and Steven Spielberg follow, which is extensive rehearsal prior, and the scenes are choreographed. The camera work's really complex, and so as long as the actor really fully understands his motivation or her motivation, why they're doing what they're doing, you can logically figure out, and you probably already have in the rehearsal process, where it feels natural for them to go. And then my cameras are laid, and when someone walks onto the set, the minute they're on set, we're rolling, and we just start shooting. I find that for me, it saves time on set. It allows for exploration through the characters and through the cameras, and not waste a lot of time. You could spend 4 hours a day. When I was on Sons of Anarchy, you know, we worked 12-hour days, but 4 of them were dedicated to a bunch of actors trying to figure out where they wanted to be, which is a huge waste of time.
So, for those few of us here who would be acting and not directing, I'm very interested in the fact that you did as well as you did in that area when you didn't love it. How did you achieve that when it wasn't something you enjoyed? What was your journey into acting?
Well, for gosh sakes, look at it.
You know, I really loved storytelling. I loved movie sets. I loved being on set. Absolutely loved it. And that was the only way I could get on them. You know, that's the only way I knew to get on them, until I figured out the other way. So that's all there was to it.
So you went and began auditioning, and that was the standard that way to get on, and to get started out?
I mean, I kind of got, I stumbled into it, is the best way to put it. You know, I was in Texas, and our family had lost the ranch that I grew up on, and I was in Austin in a mall looking for a job, and some woman walks up to me and says, "I'm a modeling scout from Chicago. You want to go to Chicago?" And I said, "Yeah, I ain't got anything else to do." And so I went to Chicago, and the day I got there, I went to an audition for Montgomery Ward's, and I got it, and I didn't leave. I stayed, and then I went to New York. I got very interested in theater in both Chicago and New York, and then, you know, the agency sent me to LA for a pilot season, and that's how it happened.
Before that modeling agent came up, you had been interested at all in entertainment?
No, absolutely. I mean, but you know, you're a kid in Texas, and things are different now than they were. You know, I'm 48 years old, so this is the late 80s. That there isn't internet, there isn't cell phones. That the nation felt much bigger. The notion of you know, leaving some small town and showing up in Hollywood and having any success seemed ridiculous to me. And I'm from Texas, so we thought of California as like far eastern communist Russia. You know, no one goes there. Yeah, you know, so it was the notion of trying something like that was terrifying. It wasn't something that and I think that you've seen in the past 30 years, because I think for a number of reasons, you know, people attaining success at what they love to do, and you know. I've heard a lot of parents recently, now that I'm a parent, tell their kids, you know, do what you love, you know, dream big. It's not what parents said in the 70s and 80s. They said, you need to go to college, and you got to get a job. You know, dreams are for dreamers. And, you know, we had a culture that actually tried to, you know, oppress that risk for fear of you failing, you know. And now, societally, we seem to be, you know, embracing that risk, which is a great thing.
You seem like you found something you love now, right?
Right here.
As a very successful director and writer, a filmmaker, where would you like to see your legacy be in 10 or 20 years? What would you like to create to leave as a message, or where are you going? Here's what you want.
I mean, I have no idea. There's a few books that I read when I was younger that really inspired me. One of them inspired me philosophically. One of them inspired me from a place of understanding narrative and understanding storytelling. And one of the benefits of having been successful now is that I have the ability, which I did, to option those books, and I'll adapt those into screenplays and direct those, and one of them could be the one that I'll hang up before I start making mediocre films.
Sorry to use up 2 tickets here, but I guess my question is, that it might be helpful for the group here, is your choreographing of creative collaboration, okay? And what, you got a crew of about 200, something like that? Marshall and I worked with a lot of these people, Ian and the Roundies, for years. They're all fantastic, but they go off and do another movie, and it doesn't do as well. They come back to Taylor, it's a beautiful piece. Now, I want to compliment you, and also ask you a question along these regards, okay? Well, first of all, you walk around Utah Film Studios. I mean, beyond the great staff you have, you're in a great facility, right? We agree with that. As an artist, I agree with that. It's a fantastic facility. But to compliment you, you walk around the studio and people are not working on the project because it's a project. They're working on the project because they trust Taylor Sheridan. They love what you do. I'm one of those people. So, not to give you, stifle you, okay? Because I know that's all a surface comment. You're coming from the sub-level. You're coming up and you're bringing it up for yourself. So, where does that come from? Where you're able to get to that point now, and I think you're going to fly. Once again, a surface comment. Don't stifle it. What do you use as your element as a collaborative, creative process for everybody to be working in one focus, one vision that's coming from you?
Very good question. And I'll go back to my actor days. I worked for some real jerks. And there are people that, look, directing is an extremely stressful job. You're responsible for a tremendous amount of money. And when this product comes out, we don't get to put asterisks at the bottom of the screen that say, I really wanted to get this shot on this one day that would have made this scene better, but the thing broke and the prop truck wasn't there and the Jenny went down. You don't get to do that, okay? People will watch it and they will say, that is good or that is bad. And the next step in your career is tethered to the reaction to that film. No directors, more so than anyone, you're only as good as your last piece of work. So that's a mountainous stress. Additionally, every day that you show up, you'll have this plan. Now I don't even make a plan. And it will go wrong. And you have to pivot and adapt. And that is what directing, really what it is. It is maintaining the vision in your head and reacting to the fact that you can't do the thing you thought you were gonna do, so what can you do that's better? How do you not compromise the vision, accepting you don't get to do the thing you thought you were gonna do? And that's a really stressful place to be. And a number of people handle that very poorly. I've always believed that it's just as hard to make a bad movie as a good one. So you might as well make a good one. And the only way to make a good one is have people that trust you and support you enough that when the going gets tough, they will figure out a way. On Wind River, I was always in a situation where I needed it to snow and it wouldn't snow. Or I needed it to not snow really bad and it would snow. And there was one day, it's the scene when Jeremy Renner is pulling Jane out from under, Corey's pulling Jane out from under the trailer after the big fight. And clearly in the big fight, it was not snowing. But in the afternoon, sun's about to go down, it is a blizzard. And the producers are saying, we're never gonna make the day, let's pick this up, we'll add this toward the end of the schedule, which is a lie. You don't shoot it, then you're never shooting it. Especially an independent film. So by God, don't leave till you get it. So I'm talking to, Craigle is the name of my key grip. And I'm talking to my DP. And I'm like, we gotta figure this out. We've got to figure out a way to shoot this frickin' thing right now, or we'll never get to shoot it. And those guys and the Teamsters all got together and they took a snowcat and got chains and hung a 40-foot scrim over, and my construction team, because you couldn't cover the trailer, built the bottom of the trailer, all on location, all in about an hour, because I was losing light, and we were able to get that shot. And that's why, when people sit there and say, someone wins an award, and like, I really want to thank the crew, and it sounds kind of like bullshit. No, it is not. And if they didn't enjoy what they were doing and really feel a part of the process creatively, and take some ownership in what's on the screen, why work that hard? Why put yourself through that much risk? So, I have as much faith in them as they have in me, and it gives me a lot of confidence to know I'll always figure it out with these guys.
I have a quick question. So you started out as an actor, now you got into writing, but you didn't have much of a background in writing, and now you write phenomenal things. How did you learn, you talked about being an architect, you just can't start drafting. So how did you kind of learn the process, the process of the story? Was it kind of just trial by fire and you just wrote it and didn't like it? Or were you, you quoted Steven Spielberg several times, did you start kind of researching and watching things that they've done? Kind of how have you gotten this education because you've become such a great writer?
Well, it was kind of it was like unconsciously getting a PhD in movie making. For 20 years, I was, I don't know how many thousands of scripts I've read, most of them really bad. I don't know how many TV shows I've done, most of them really bad. I have a lot of experience making bad material. Likewise, I love movies, so I have a lot of experience watching really good movies. And so when I sat down to write, I said, I have absolutely no idea how to do this, but by God, I know how not to. So if I just don't do any of that, it should probably turn out pretty good. And so that's what I did. And I followed the rules that are very simple, as far as don't use dialogue to move plot. They're moving pictures. The camera tells the story, and the dialogue should be, characters reacting to what they've seen and what they've done. And that's the most commonly broken rule in Hollywood. You could pick the superhero movie and watch them shatter that rule time and time and time again. And following that one basic rule can take an okay movie and make it pretty good. And it can make a pretty good movie really good. Just that simple. And then it's just, there's a certain amount of it that is, I don't know if it's talent or luck or what, but it's not explainable.
You guys okay with one more from back here? Sure. Good? Okay.
Hi, we're those people from Iowa. You said you were from Texas, and we're both the same age, so, back when we were growing up, the world did seem much bigger. But we have a young lady here who would like to make a career in acting, and do you have any advice for somebody from the middle of the country and getting started in that?
Well, how old is the young lady?
17.
17. She good?
We think so.
Well, you'll know. You can watch a movie and know. All right, so realistically, that's a good age, okay? There are challenges to finding, the thing about acting is you don't control your destiny, all right? The first thing you have to do is go find an advocate on your behalf, and that's an agent. So how do you do that? When everyone's trying to find them and everyone's telling them, I want to be a star and I'm going to be a big actor someday. And they're only as good as their reputation, and their reputation is built upon constantly showing casting directors and directors like myself, hey, I've got this person no one's ever heard of, they're really good, you should see them. And then when I see them, they're really good. Whether or not they get the job is irrelevant. I trust that agent a little more, and the more I trust that agent, the more that agent's clients will be seen. And so that's kind of how this works as far as the actress goes. A lot of people would say, well, go to Juilliard, go somewhere and study for 4 years. That's not a good plan because they have no idea. And university acting is totally different than what we're doing in Hollywood. And this is not a knock on Juilliard, it's not a knock on NYU. It's just my experience having been in Hollywood for so long. Those are, she gets out at 22 and she's studied a lot, she's trained a lot, but now she's 4 years behind all the 18-year-old girls that went out there and took a chance. So my thinking would be, and Hollywood's a rough place. So let me actually really think about this, because I think you're probably talking to me about your daughter. So
No, but she is right here.
okay. So I need this advice to be really good. So if it's taken and it doesn't work, I don't get sued. Two notions worth considering. Movies don't film in Hollywood. It's too expensive. That's why I'm sitting in Park City. They film in Utah. They film, and I would like more of them to film here, to a larger degree. To a larger degree, they film in New Mexico, Albuquerque primarily, Louisiana, and Atlanta. So, for me as a filmmaker, I'm going to shoot in these states because it's cheaper and I get a rebate. But that rebate is tethered to me hiring people who are local. Okay, local crew, local cast. There is no rebate on the people that come from Hollywood. So, if she were to live in a place to start out where there is a rebate and there's aggressive filming in that spot, now you're in a position where there's more demand than there is supply. And getting that agent will be much, much easier, because they can go, yeah, you can act. Here, put yourself on tape. Here's some material. Let me see you for 60 seconds. Yep, you can act. Yep, you have a great look. Okay, I'll sign you. And she'll be auditioning far more than the people that are spending $2,000 a month in some dump apartment in North Hollywood. They really will. And then she can build a resume and have some proof that she can act, and then she can go to Hollywood. That would be, if I was to do it again, that's how I would do it.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that's it. So on behalf of the Utah Film Studios, the Utah Film Festival, and the Utah Film Awards, let's, one more time, give it up for Richard Bonavicci and Taylor Sheridan. Thank you guys.